While the climate wars fire up here, the push to renewable energy and the way it simply does not work is playing out in two countries that are especially close to Australia. The bitter experience elsewhere shows that the path that Labor, the Greens and the Teals want Australia to stay on will lead to power chaos and shortages. In the UK, the Labor Party, that's certain to form government after the next election in just a few weeks, is promising to ban any future gas exploration in the North Sea.
I've been very, very clear when it comes to the transition that we're not turning off the taps. Oil and gas will be part of the mix for many years. We're not revoking any licences. But a transition is coming. And when Ed and I went to Aberdeen with Anas just a few months ago to talk to the workforce, of course, to talk to the unions, to talk to the energy sector, everybody knows the transition is coming.
Whoa, here we go, hey? Why is that a worry? Well, that's just what they said across the ditch in New Zealand. The Kiwis have already gone down that path. And even though they've got stacks of hydroelectricity and they don't rely on fossil fuels for a huge share of their power, their shambolic experience shows that banning gas exploration is a disaster. 6 years ago, the former Kiwi Labor Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern declared the world had moved on from fossil fuels and scrapped any new exploration licences.
And we are no longer issuing permits for offshore oil and gas exploration.
It is an exciting time for energy innovation. We have pledged to stop issuing permits for offshore oil and gas exploration.
Yeah, and as you can see, Ardern was actually boasting about this retreat from modernity, this bit of climate virtue signalling that would undermine her own country's energy and economic future. She lapped it all up.
We have done more in 24 months than any government in New Zealand has ever done on climate action.
Yeah, little old New Zealand, which makes up about 0.1% of global emissions. No, seriously, the Kiwis contribute 0.01% of global emissions, less than Trinidad and Tobago, for instance. But Ardern was intent on saving the planet. Well, how did all that work out? Well, after banning new exploration, New Zealand began to run short of gas supplies. That's how this works. You've got to constantly tap into new wells. So when their hydro ran a little dry and the wind wasn't blowing, they faced blackouts. And pretty soon the government they just had to explain, and they had to explain what was going on. And suddenly Jacinda Ardern was a little camera shy and let her minister do the talking.
Nevertheless, New Zealanders have a right to expect that on a cold night that the power will stay on and they'll be able to keep the lights on and heat themselves.
Extraordinary, isn't it? No matter the warnings they get, no matter the engineering facts, no matter the logic, no matter the obvious vulnerabilities of intermittent, unreliable renewables, they all like to pretend that they can dispense with fossil fuels. Of course, New Zealand bans nuclear as well, so they don't have a lot of options. These political zealots forget about their responsibility to their constituents. They forget about how energy is the very lifeblood of our economy, of our society, indeed of our civilisation. And instead they try to impress the United Nations set. And people suffer. New Zealand, now under a right-of-centre Nationals government, well, right-of-centre for New Zealand, is now overturning that gas exploration ban. They've recognised that they need power. And for reliable power, guess what? They need gas. You'd think the POMs would heed these same lessons. They've had a chance to learn those lessons from the UK, from New Zealand. But it looks like Keir Starmer and the Labor Party in the UK are going to make the same mistake there. And of course, there are plenty in our own political system in Australia who want to go down the same dead-end path.
Australia, like the rest of the world, needs to get out of coal and gas. The climate crisis, the floods, the fires are fuelled by coal and gas. What is becoming clearer by the day is that there is no justification, economically or environmentally, for opening up new coal and gas projects.
So while the climate and energy debate continues here, we need to be very careful about what we wish for. Everywhere there are warning signs, but Labor, the Greens and the Teals ignore them.
Cost of living relief is our #1 policy, and that's why as well our energy policy is aimed fairly and squarely at support for the cheapest form of new energy. We know that's renewables.
This would be the same push to renewables that has delivered us the highest power prices ever and the least reliable electricity we've ever had. Just like Jacinda Ardern, one of their Labor heroes, this mob just ignore reality in pursuit of costly ideological dreams.